Thank you, Gary. As Gary mentioned, I'm Tom Purves. I'm a product management advisor in FinTech and Actionable AI. And I have some fantastic panelists here with me today. We've got Armando, who's head of AI and quantitative engineering at BMO. Baiju, who leads the research and applied AI and ML teams at TD. And Christine, who's CIO and CTO at Questrade. So we have just 30 minutes, so I want to really get right to it and cut through the hype, as we're promising to do here. We've all been, in this current wave of AI, especially over the last 2 years, been told that AI is going to solve everything. But let's get more specific and provide some grounded examples here. I want to ask you guys, more specifically in our industry, what are some use cases? Give us one example of a use case that you're excited about and that your teams are having success with generative AI.
Okay, I guess I'm kicking us off. Good morning, everybody. So I think AI it's not something new. It's been building, right? And we've been investing actively for a number of years, building up models, building up capabilities, including things like automated MLOps pipeline, which is similar to like a software automation pipeline. And you start to get, lots of opportunities to deploy across a whole variety of areas, across service and across sales, marketing, legal. But most of those use cases are the kind of things you'll read about more or less everywhere. They're kind of like the low-hanging fruit category. Where the real fun happens and what excites us is the intersection of Gen AI together with traditional AI models, together with existing data products, together with microservices, and able to do things like agent AIs that harness and bring all of that capability together, and essentially allowing users, whether internally or externally, to essentially be able to interact with natural language, right, all of those capabilities, but harness everything that was built prior. So connect with the microservices, connect with the entirety of the platform, data products, et cetera. That's where we see really fun and interesting stuff.
Good, yeah. Hello, good morning, everybody. Happy to be here. As Christine mentioned, AI is not new. We've been working at it for quite a number of years. So all the good work now is coming right at the time that Gen AI is becoming significant, is becoming equivalent of AI. So from that perspective, the main use cases that we've seen are around productivity gains and just access to Gen AI. So particularly in our team, being a more quantitative and technical team, we've seen how Code Assistant has helped us do our job better, write better code, more efficient, anticipate bugs. That ultimately allows us to get to the final result faster. But then the other that I mentioned is just having access to these models in an interface that is blessed by the bank, follows internal regulations. And what I'm excited about that one in particular is because that's what's going to define the next generation of use cases. The best way to come up with applications is by allowing people, the users within the organization, to try to experiment. If the quantitative teams are the ones creating those applications, we might create something that is not truly what's going to make the change. So I think for me, those two are the most important applications that are going to make a difference in the near term.
Thank you. I'm just going to build upon the responses there, which is, in my view, I think it's really exciting to be in this space because of the composition of services that can unlock this next level of productivity gains that we're going to see. Now, the most exciting things in our case, have to be constrained by regulatory and other constraints, right? And in that context, I think we're really excited about knowledge management type applications with humans in the loop. And if you look at a large enterprise, you'd be surprised at the man hours and minutes that go in tasks that that with the language sort of unlock that we have with Gen AI can really, really boost productivity gains. And we've been talking about that in Canada, about productivity gains, and I think this is real. And equally exciting is that I've been doing this for many years now, and you know, AI has always been in the background. It's always been hard to deploy. It's always easy to do POCs. It's really hard to kind of bring it to market. And what we've seen now is really those cycle times are, you know, sort of collapsing and really accelerating. And in the case of, let's say, TD, for instance, we have our tech day today, and you'll see announcements around us really scaling some of those use cases and not just talking about it in the POC context. These are actually going, and it's going to have a positive impact on our colleagues and customers. So that's exciting as someone, as a practitioner.
Armando, what have you seen as, in your organization, the departments or groups that are the first real power users and adopters of AI?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this, and my answer has evolved. Initially, I thought that the right place to deploy AI was first to quantitative or more technical teams. And the reason for that is because they've been thinking in code, so they know how to talk to the machine. But really, I think there is something beyond just the technical teams that is going to make a difference in the long run. In particular, anything that uses large amount of text. And that is because generative AI is good at that. It's good at analyzing text, summarizing information, crafting messages following a particular style. So in our case, one of the other places that follows that pattern is research, particular equity research, where you have to read a lot of documentation, you have to craft a message that sometimes targets a particular audience. For that, AI is incredible. Still, each individual has to go and learn and read a good chunk of those documents, but is going to be targeted. And two important considerations here. The first one is that there is a journey, and that journey involves a high level of education. So, as I mentioned earlier, getting familiar with the AI. But also, that education should be at all places of the organization, not only the final users, but also the leaders of the organization. And then finally is that you need to you have to take into account that human in the loop is going to be very important, especially the early stages of AI, where all these applications are generating content, helping make decisions, but ultimately the human is the one who's going to press the send on the email, or is going to reply, is going to communicate with the client. So for me, those are the main places where I would deploy AI and how I see the importance of doing it in a careful way.
Thank you. And Christine, when we were speaking earlier, you mentioned the importance of a multi-pronged strategy for adoption of AI within the bank. Could you elaborate on what you mean by that?
Yes, happily. So I suspect my view will evolve, but in the moment, I kind of see like 4 categories of how you can start to propel adoption across an enterprise. The first category has been talked about. It's kind of the day-to-day activities. It's, you know, meeting assistance, it's email, it's content generation. I'm generally of the view that that kind of day-to-day work of like an average individual across a firm is best served by a productivity suite. So, you know, be it Google Workspace AI or Microsoft, you know, Teams, integrated into the flow of that activity. So that'd be the first category. Second category would be instances where it's a specialized use case, specialized ways of working, but not something that is particularly unique to your organization. So in those instances, I think it's best served by specialized platforms that have embedded capabilities that are meant to augment those, you know, ways of working. Examples would be the work that Salesforce is doing to, you know, enhance and bring efficiency into call center activities. The next category is where it starts to get quite interesting. This is where it's specialized capabilities, but it is unique to your organization. It requires, you know, intersection into an ecosystem of systems. It's leveraging your APIs. It's leveraging your other traditional models your data assets, and you're trying to do something unique, whether it be kind of client-facing or internal. In those instances, that's when you're going to lean on your internal AI talent or talent augmentation strategies to do something that is unique and specific to your org. And the last category that's distinct in my mind is engineering, because it's simultaneously specialized roles and capabilities and a need for a specialized set of tooling and processes. And so that would be the last category where, you know, it would be an intersection of different things, which collectively is aiming to either improve quality or to enhance velocity. So those would be the four main categories that I see.
Thank you. Now, the other thing that strikes me is the last few years have been full of hype around this current wave of generative AI, but we in the financial services industry aren't strangers to working with AI and modeling and machine learning. Baiju, how does generative AI fit in the bigger picture for you guys relative to more traditional predictive AI and other techniques?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. AI, as others have mentioned, is not new. And generative AI is just the latest iteration of that. If you look at it in the last 20 years, I think adoption within large enterprises has followed the path of AI evolution as well. So, you know, in the late 90s and 2000s, you had statistical machine learning, and that drove things like pricing algorithm, risk adjudication, and so on. And so you have hundreds of models of that nature that exist today. In the mid-2000s or 2010s, we had the vision sort of come into play, right? And again, we see adoption in some of the use cases of those kind of techniques. Now we have the language unlock. This is big. I mean, this is the seat of our own intelligence, and this is why people are excited about it. And as mentioned, there are real productivity gains to be had there. The economics actually exist. And we've now matured in enterprises so that we can start adopting these things at a much faster pace. But the world is going to look more complex in the sense that there's going to be multiple types of AIs depending on constraints and the type of problems that you're trying to solve. It's not going to be Gen AI for everything. And so the complexity of the world is going to increase in the sense that you still have to think about things like MLOps in the context of LLMs. How does that work? I don't believe it would be controversial that most enterprises have figured it out outside of perhaps big tech companies, right? So it's going to be a world where there's a lot more complexity, a lot more operational risk that one has to manage if you're trying to scale this to thousands of, employees or customers and so on. So that operational risk aspect has to be taken into consideration. So it's going to be, again, it's a hard problem, but to me, that's exciting. And then particularly exciting for me is where Gen AI can lead to as well. So great. It's a language unlock, but what makes it great for language also makes it great for other types of use cases. If you look at a typical machine learning shop, most of the time you're feature engineering, and that is inserting your human intelligence into that modeling process. Once you start getting away from that, there's potential unlocks that really, really excite us, and so I'm really keen to kind of push the boundaries of where we can go next with this beyond the language kind of use cases.
So I want to zoom back a minute. As I've been talking to a lot of practitioners, founders and builders in the banking space around AI, definitely the themes are coming out that productivity is an easy early win, that's starting to automate workflows, but building more sophisticated AI apps is hard. We are on this curve where the models are getting better and better, the tools and the frameworks are getting better, and I'd love to get your take of where we are on that. The constraints that I often hear are, everything: talent, data. How do we evaluate quality of models? How do we get stakeholders comfortable with taking something that was a science experiment, but then trusting it in production in front of real customers? And so this is really is the juice worth the squeeze question at this moment in time for, take any of us here at the scale of an individual bank, not with the resources of a Google or a Facebook. Is the juice worth the squeeze to be building sophisticated, productized AI right now?
I can start. I think it's some of the things that I mentioned. If you look at scaling a Gen AI, let's say, application, You're going from a world that, a typical bank is very used to a static world. You have some data, you train a model, you validate a model, and you deploy a model. Now you're going into this world where actually everything's changing continuously, especially if you're using third-party providers. And traditional concept of model risk management, compliance, all need to be rethought. And then on top of that, the engineering challenge of saying, well, if everything's moving and you want a certain level of performance out of those systems, how do you guarantee that? So those are kind of, to me, challenges beyond the AI itself that one has to think about, which I was mentioning in the context of the operationalization of this is not as trivial as it seems, especially when you're trying to do this at scale.
Yeah, I completely agree. We are somewhat close to a tech company in the sense that we use technology to run our businesses. But we don't have the same resources to deploy to focus just purely on AI. So from that perspective, what we need to focus is on using these tools that are already at a very good state of the art. It's incredible. Yesterday there was the latest announcement from OpenAI. I looked at all the videos, quite impressive. If you haven't, please check them out. And what I look forward is to integrate that into my products and not necessarily build from scratch. And I think this trend is something that many other companies are realizing, that they cannot compete with the tech companies on that front. But the difference, though, is that we have data that is unique to us that the models have not seen. And by merging that data with these incredible models, that's what's going to make the difference for companies like financial institutions. But in addition to that, we also have to think, what are the things that are not going to change? As Baiju already mentioned, we have to continue pricing assets. We have to continue running our business, assigning credit cards and many others, out of which many of those don't have anything to do with Gen AI. They're traditional machine learning models that are going to continue working the way they are, again, leveraging our internal data. So it is worth the squeeze. I would say maybe if you have something super specific and at some point these models, by adding the context of your own data, doesn't give you enough to make a difference, then there could be an avenue. But I think as it is now, definitely is better to be takers in the space of Gen AI.
I would say it depends on the use case. When it comes to anything, and I think we've all been saying somewhat similar, when it comes to anything where there is a human element, like there's still a human that is interacting with, success for that type of a use case is going to depend on change management. It's going to depend on professional development. But ultimately, there's a reliance on that human element to, deal with any of the limitations that exist with the technology today. But then, when it comes to the much more interesting, and it's not that you're not going to be building the underlying cores. There's best of breed LLMs out there. They're evolving really rapidly. What you are going to be building and investing in my mind, is the platform and the capabilities that allow you to leverage that, and to leverage that in conjunction with all of the other technology that has come before. And when you start looking at use cases where there is no human, right? It is a systemic use of Gen AI, or it is an instance where you deem it mission critical, right? That's where the use cases, the tech may not be able to deliver reliably on a kind of consistent manner, and you may have to kind of evaluate, is it ready? But my bigger caution is about paying attention to the bigger picture, because it's evolving really, really fast. And it is the way in which I think it will evolve is with greater recognition of the limitations. The risk isn't going to go away, but with the greater recognition of the limitations, there will be capabilities that will start to come in to augment the AI that are really around risk mitigation type of capabilities. And the organizations who have jumped on the learning curve early and who have been on that kind of collective learning curve of everything that goes into making an organization in a state where it is predisposed to get value from the technology, those companies will be able to broaden their usage really fast as it evolves, as opposed to organizations that may be saying, you know what, it's early days, there's probably too much hype, I'm going to observe, and sometime down the road when the tech is ready, that's when I'm going to get active, right? I really think that what will separate the speed with which organizations can adopt AI and their success on their trajectory with AI is going to come down to that fundamental of, is there an engineering mindset being applied? Like that willingness to jump in, to test and learn, to iterate, and to kind of be a part of the transformation that this technology is bringing forward.
I'll add one thing to this. This is that these are here and now problems as well. Because even with humans in the loop systems that we're talking about, remember the kind of use cases we talked about are helping, potentially a very junior employee helping a customer do something. And so the issues of trustworthy AI are really here and now, because we can't just simply say that because there's a human in the loop there, we've de-risked this whole thing. Well, no, if someone's day 2 in his job would not know about banking procedures as someone who's been there for 10 years, right? So some of the adjacencies around this in terms of trustworthy AI are tremendously important, and the need to invest in them right now. So for instance, I'll give you one example. We invest a lot in trustworthy AI, and we kind of, we publish this thing. So one of the things is that, AI systems, including Gen AI, make point predictions. They're gonna tell you an answer. They don't necessarily give you uncertainty bounds and conformal predictions. That's an active area where trust is gonna be built when you let an underwriter know the prediction, but the uncertainty bounds around it, and or a set of choices versus a single choice. How do you go from a point prediction to a set prediction? Those little things are helping actually adopt the technology faster, and we have to deal with it today within the current governance and regulatory environment. And so I think it's a parallel path there that enterprises or any size company needs to adopt in terms of driving Gen AI and AI adoption.
It almost sounds like the debate around self-driving cars of the better the car gets at driving, the more worried you are that the driver's going to lose focus and just assume the AI can take the wheel, right? When you have it,
too much trust in that.
I'd like to sort of extend that question of like trust as being one of the major constraints, regardless of everything else. Would you agree that that is one of the major constraints to the deployability of AI, or is there another aspect that you think if you could fix tomorrow that would unlock more potential from the technology?
Yeah, certainly explainability is one of the now problems, but in the future, and I think it's an extension of the idea, is the over-reliance on AI. As Baiju put it, if you have someone who's experienced, that experience is in their brain and that is not in any model. That would be one concern. And I'm sure if we were to shut down all the generative AI models today, we would create a big deal around the world. But yeah, to me, those are the most important aspects of AI.
I think the other thing I would highlight is none of us are seeing the true cost of this technology, because all of the players are in a horse race, right? They just want adoption, they want to propel capability, they'll be launching things into production, whether they're in the right state of readiness or not, right? I'm talking about the underlying providers. The community is changing very organically. This technology is evolving. And so those who are in the business of providing Gen AI technology to organizations to consume are not passing down the true cost of that technology to those organizations today because they just want adoption, right? But someday, the true cost will come. So when it comes to making those choices around where you leverage and where you invest, I think it's really important, when you're talking about the lemon and the squeeze, right? How much juice you get. You better make sure that those business cases are an order of magnitude of value compared to your perceived cost today, with recognition that, the real costs are coming.
Pick the right use case. Make sure it's solving a real business problem, not just using AI for the sake of AI. I get it. If you had any other parting words of advice of stuff you wish you knew when you started about conceiving of and then bringing a successful AI project through to completion, what would be a tip you could share with our audience?
I would say just recognize that there's a whole slew of preconditions that really kind of enable this to happen. You need to have your data in an extremely good state, right? You need to have the quality and all of the necessary governance and controls around it. You need to have the underlying capabilities, the MLOps pipelines. Soon you're going to need LLOps pipelines. It was already mentioned around education, at all levels of the organization. So, you need to ensure that leaders are educated and that, there's a culture of innovation that exists around this technology. You need to have a systematic way by which you can attach the quantum of investment to how you will derive value, right? We've also talked a lot up here about, policies and procedures. How do you, ensure necessary ethics, necessary compliance and oversight? And this is also evolving as regulators around the world struggle with this. So there's a lot of preconditions that are part of the whole story. So if those aren't in place, there should be investment into that as well.
Yeah, I think we cover the main topics, but to me the two most important is one, finding value, and the second, solving it from the perspective of collaboration. You cannot do it just from the technical side, the business side. You have to bring those two together, and then that's when you find the most gains, because either one side or the other are going to think what the right solution is, but in reality, and that's what we've seen, it is somewhere nowhere near the middle, it's somewhere completely out there.
Yeah, I'll add one more thing to that, is that it's just a caution that, I think we're in this kind of a cycle where there's a lot of hype, but also there's a lot of kind of thinking around, it's a box, you double click, it works. And for a consumer product, yes, especially if you're going out to the third parties, right? I think talent and having multidisciplinary teams is going to be your biggest constraint, because even if you're using a third-party solution, the amount of work that you need to do to kind of get it to a point where it's a reliable thing within your context of the case that you're trying to do is a lot harder. And right now in this kind of a cycle, the sales is great, you know what I mean? It just works out of the box. Well, not quite. It really depends on the use case.
Yeah, sorry if I may. And you're going to have many people telling you that they solve AI, and they're going to come selling you all sorts of products. I don't think anybody has.
I love that, yeah. And I think you've also given us some important clues, too, of start with use cases that are lower risk to get comfortable with the technology and the behavior, start with human-in-the-loop processes, and evolve from there. I want to thank all of you for participating in our panel today. Please join